describe the industrialization process in the book. Describe what that is for our listeners, and how is social media a part of that, and why is that important for us to know?
Yeah. So the industrialization process is something that's been underway, since those factories went up in London, Charles Dickens. And the idea is that you can, for the goal and purposes of production and efficiency, right? You can structure work. You can structure life in such a way that is increasingly productive, increasingly efficient. And certainly industrialization is linked to, the market economy. And so other terms people have used that are probably maybe more descriptive are the commercialization of life, or the dehumanization of life, where increasingly the ways that we think and the ways that we live are dominated by goals of efficiency, productivity, and historically in the interests of commerce. But the idea is that because we've gotten so accustomed to a market mentality, we have adopted this to ourselves. We've adopted this goal of efficiency and productivity to our own lives. And so social media comes in, interestingly, right? Saying that, hey, we're a platform that's going to help you connect with your family and friends better. But they themselves are a business with certain ends. They're interested in getting our engagement and getting our attention kind of constant on their platforms. And so what I write about in that chapter is about how social media leads us into a space where we actually also participate in industrializing each other in our interactions and also ourselves. And what I mean by that is, to the extent that when we get on Instagram, we feel like we need to just, go through the feed and like, right, every single post of our friends, because we know that's how they're gonna feel like they exist, or like this is just how the game is, right? Like you just gotta right. And so we've used this sort of quantifiable way of affirming each other to barter, in some ways, affirmation in a reciprocal way. When we're on social media, we learn, we get trained to perform, right? We know what it takes to get the right kind of attention. And so all of our communication is encouraged to become a kind of broadcasting rather than actual relational communication with each other. It's a necessity in that space. And we also come to reify, is the term that I use from Georg Lukács. We reify each other. That is, we start to see each other as things, right? Rather than, this is a little like Martin Buber's, I and thou. We treat each other as objects, right? That need to be either coerced or persuaded to like our posts, or we want to, we just gotta, I think about all the emails that I get, I'm so frustrated because within an hour I get 50. And so now I'm just not even paying attention. Like, I'm not treating people as people. I'm just like trying to get these emails done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we kind of reduce each other to tasks, right, that need to be done. And then finally, I talk about, and this is to one of the points you just made earlier, I think what social media does in the most tragic way is that it encourages us to see it, like what happens in social media, as the most important part of our lives, and that what's happening.
As you were saying.
Yeah. So I think the things that social media encourages us to experience, or that what happens on social media is actually the most important part of our experience or day, right? Like, I think a lot of us know what it's like to, when you get the notification, when you have that experience where you get the notification and it doesn't matter what's happening around you, you feel like that's the most important thing to check. Mm-hmm. Right. And so one of the things that social media encourages in us is to see whatever else is happening around us, mm-hmm. as like it's just something that can be interrupted, right? That family member that's talking to you, right, comes second to that notification about someone commenting on your post, right? And so it's that the aspect of industrialization that suggests there are things, people, that are considered waste in an experience or in a pursuit of efficiency and productivity, right? Like, I just got to write this email, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I can't right now, like, I've got to do this. It's that urgency that we often feel. And, it's all of these things, right? The quantification, the performance, the reification, it all kind of comes together to shape the way that we navigate our relationships, right? And shapes what we think is important and valuable, shapes how we think about how we ought to shape even our own identities, right? So many of us, so many of my students talk about how they don't want to interrupt when someone else is doing something, and I feel this way too very often. Like, I don't want to interrupt. Someone gets a notification. Oh, no. That must be more important, right? So there's a way in which we ourselves even defer. You're like, oh, no. It's not even so much that someone else is more important, but it's tending to the social media feed that is more important, right? And I think that's where there are really strange dynamics that are trained in us when social media becomes the most formative or most frequent space in which we interact with each other and engage the world. And so I think all this to say, there's nothing, it's not like being on social media is in and of itself, right, like a sinful thing or an evil thing. It's more that we need to be awakened to its formative powers, right? And the ways that it is telling us a story about what it means to be a good human being, what it means to be a good friend, what it means to be a good employee, right? It is constantly shaping that. And unless we have some sort of counter narrative about what those things are, right, that we are intentionally living into, it's just easy to kind of just go the way, right, of these structural habits and routines.
You mentioned then this counter narrative. You also talk about a social imaginary. What is, for those that are listening, they may or may have not heard the term, but what is a social imaginary, and why is that important?
Yeah, so that's a term that Charles Taylor, philosopher, wrote on. And you have a social imaginary is what is actually very close to what I was saying before about a story, right? It is an account of how things are that we all kind of live with, whether it's articulated or not. And so Taylor writes about how every age, right, every society going through a particular era may have has a social imaginary about what it means to be human, what it looks like to live well, right? And so arguably our contemporary society in its technological dimensions is training us up in a particular social imaginary, right? About where our worth comes from, what community life ought to feel like. And I think that's where the Christian narrative and we can talk about the kind of biblical arc of creation, fall, and redemption. That creates a kind of shape for a social imaginary about what our lives are about. Where are we situated in the creation, fall, and redemption narrative? But it's, I think, something that Christians we have this resource. But I think so many of us tend to live into a Christianity that is more focused on morality issues or certain kinds of personal piety, rather than kind of fully engaging in this story, right? That we are inevitably, we're all living into some story, right? Whether we know it or not.